1951, Jubilee year. Canberra was just 24 years old, and the stage set for celebrations to mark the 50th anniversary of the Federation. A Jubilee parade outside Government House was attended by Governor-General Sir William McKell, former Labour Premier of New South Wales. Prime Minister Menzies was accompanied by Dame Patty and their daughter Heather. This was the site first mentioned in 1911. 910 square miles of New South Wales set aside to form a capital territory, a location from which the city was to rise. Parliament House, here seen nearing completion, was designed as a temporary building, but is still the home of federal politicians. It was opened on the 9th of May 1927 by the Duke and Duchess of York, who were to ascend the throne after the abdication of Edward VIII. The ceremony took place in the Senate chamber. Elder statesman Billy Hughes, who had witnessed this historic opening of Parliament, sends a Jubilee message to the people of the Commonwealth.
These 50 years have been the most eventful in all human history, bringing with them changes in every sphere of our national life, and the two greatest wars the world has ever known. When in 1900 Queen Victoria signed the Act which brought the Australian Commonwealth into being, she was the head of the greatest empire the world had ever known. We in Australia have come far and done much. Our destiny beckons us on. If we are to survive, we must gird up our loins. We must have abiding courage and faith, and our faith must be fortified by deeds.
The Jubilee celebrations carried on with colourful pageantry and a strong accent on the deeds of Australian pioneers. One of Captain Charles Sturt's inland river expeditions was reenacted. The party, clad in styles of those days, was farewelled from Government House. A jubilant start to a journey which was to take the explorers by road to the Murrumbidgee to launch a whaleboat on a 1,000-mile trip. In Bendigo, Cobb & Co. coaches rolled again to celebrate the centenary of the discovery of gold in Victoria. The gold rush disrupted the life and economy of the country. While in Wagga, the exploits of bushrangers in the gold fever era were recalled by a hold-up of a stagecoach with a timely or maybe melodramatic rescue by police troopers. Cobb & Co. coaches originated in the USA, and it was from there that President Truman's personal envoy, John Foster Dulles, arrived in Australia to discuss Lend-Lease problems and the terms of the Japanese peace treaty. Later, he was to become Secretary of State under President Eisenhower. Another famous American visitor was Thomas A. Dewey, governor of New York State and former presidential candidate. While on a world goodwill trip, Dewey took time off to gain an insight into our wool industry as a guest of Max Faulkner of the famous Bunuk stud. Back in the federal capital, External Affairs Minister Casey signed the Colombo Plan, pledging Australia to millions of pounds worth of aid to India, Ceylon and Pakistan, a humanitarian project aimed chiefly at assisting them to develop their sadly inadequate food-producing industries. As a Jubilee guest of the Commonwealth, His Grace the Archbishop of York, Dr. Garbutt, is greeted by Archbishop Mole. Famous Australian singer Marjorie Lawrence, herself a polio victim, gave this message of hope and encouragement at a Victorian orthopaedic hospital.
I do want to tell you what a great joy it is for me to be here with you all today. You know, when I was first stricken with infantile paralysis, everyone said it was hopeless, and that I would probably never sing again and never be able to get around again. Well, I worked hard at it, as I know you're all going to do, with this fine treatment that you'll get here And I want each and every one of you to try your very hardest to get well again just as quickly as you can.
Another famous Australian artist, this time radio comedian Dick Bentley, arrived from London and treated us to some wharfside humor.
Hello, Dick. Let's give you a hand with these things. Now, how does it like to be back in your own country?
Oh, wonderful, Frank. I left here when I was 17.
Sure.
4 years
What's
ago.
up?
Yeah.
What up?
Yeah. Hey, be careful with that trunk, not wanted on the voyage. It's got my wife inside. Where's my violin? Where's my violin?
Violin?
Where is it?
I've got it here. What's all the fuss? What about the amusement on board, Dick? Did you have a lot of fun with the deck sports?
No, they all had their husbands with them.
But in 1951, there was very little humor on the wharves. Big Jim Healy, undisputed, tough, pipe-smoking boss of the Waterside Workers' Federation, had banned loading of ships to New Zealand. He was sentenced to 6 weeks jail and fined on 4 charges of interfering with trade across the Tasman. Dr. Evatt took a prominent part in the legal proceedings that was to evoke widespread criticism, even from his own colleagues within the party. Extra police were on duty to control large crowds and demonstrators, including communist leader Jim Sharkey and other self-confessed communists. Overseas, the free nations of the world once again answered the call to arms as the communist forces of North Korea strove to engulf the anti-red southern half of the country. Australians joined the forces of the United Nations, and the 3rd Battalion, led by Lieutenant Colonel Ferguson, upheld the highest traditions of the AIF, winning an American unit citation at Kapiong. The decoration was won on the 25th of April, 1951, the 36th anniversary of Anzac. Eloquent and indisputable proof that the spirit of Anzac was as strong as ever. The destroyer, HMAS Bataan, returned home from Korea flying the United Nations flag, the first ship to fly it in Australian waters. The dangers of wartime patrols were forgotten as men rushed ashore and tears of joy flowed freely at the emotional wharfside reunions. With the possibility of a large-scale conflict developing over the Korean situation, national military training was introduced for youths of 18 years in 1951. Although the 98 days training period was considered too short, the Army still marched on its stomach. Weight increases averaged 6.5 pounds per trainee in this camp near Brisbane. National service training worked wonders on these 18-year-olders, taking to jungle warfare like New Guinea veterans. Action in 1951. In January 1951, storm warnings had been issued when the collier Kiama left Newcastle with 506 tons of coal and a crew of 12. Heavy seas shifted the cargo and the ship capsized off the entrance, New South Wales. 6 of the crew managed to swim ashore, the rest perished, including the captain. From tragedy to triumph, Captain P.G. Taylor returned from a survey of the Pacific Ocean to Chile, South America. Another achievement in a long career of aviation. An associate of the great Smithy, no Australian has ever contributed so much in the field of air route pioneering and navigation. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands lined the streets in capital cities to watch the Jubilee processions. New Australians from all over Europe dressed in national costume added to the colourful spectacle, displaying enthusiasm for their new country. This coach carried the Duke of Gloucester in the Melbourne Centenary of 1934. A memorable cavalcade of Jubilee. This was not only a year for parades, but a big year for chess players. And at this open-air contest at Bondi Beach, 3 Australian chess champions, Purdy, Steiner and Koshniski, challenged 20 players at a time. A fundraising stunt for the Red Cross in 1951. A check for a checkmate in this open-air contest. But indoors came a revolutionary change in the marketing of the latest fashions. A gimmick for gowns, one might say, as leading Sydney models took their wares to factories. Workers were given a lunchtime look at the new look. On this chap, the effect could even be described as hypnotic. Tiny Rosalie Campbell played her first tune on a piano when she was just 18 months old, before she learned to talk or walk. Here in 1951, she was just 2½. By the time she was 9, she'd won 21 silver cups and 10 medals. On the eve of her 10th birthday, she became the youngest soloist ever to play with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. Brought from the outback of New South Wales by the Aborigines Welfare Board, 90 native Australians descended upon Sydney's Luna Park. A day they'll never forget. And for the natives up in New Guinea, a day they will remember. Without warning, one January morning, the Owen Stanley Range rocked as the side of volcanic Mount Lamington blew out. Death came mercifully swift to more than 4,000 people. Villages and inhabitants in the direct path disappeared without trace. Rescue teams flown into the wartime Popondetta airstrips came upon unbelievable scenes of carnage as they probed the stricken area. 350 million tons of earth blown out. The blast had a lethal range of 6 miles and a destructive force greater than the atom bomb. It was an extraordinary spectacle. The jungle for miles a mantle of pumice. Mount Lamington and Mother Nature on the rampage. In Sydney Harbour, the trading ship Bololo's short but colourful career was threatened when a cargo of copra burst into fire, but she survived to maintain her link with the Pacific Islands. Inland in the parched northwest districts of New South Wales, a much more ferocious blaze was wreaking widespread havoc. Started by lightning and fanned by strong winds, the flames swept through thousands of acres of pastures, consuming valuable crops, destroying miles of fencing. For nearly 2 weeks, beaters fought the inferno. Thousands of sheep perished, some suffocated, some incinerated by that most frightening of all menaces of the outback, the bushfire. Later in the year, after heavy rains, rust ravaged crops in the wheat belt of the same area. And where the grain was not ruined by rust, a new disease called septoria attacked the roots and lower stems. Then lettuce weed choked growth and clogged headers. But these setbacks and problems, caused by nature's contrariness, tested man's ingenuity. Inventive brains produced a new type of conveyor for a bulk handling system which eliminated costly handling and speeded the grain from mobile bins to capacious silos on the farm, enabling stocks to be held in safety until space was available at the railhead silos. Further inland, for the Reverend John Flynn, this famous landmark was a boundary post on the largest church parish in the world. Alice Springs, an oasis where on this 23rd day of May, 1951, at a simple funeral, men and women of all classes and creeds gathered to bid farewell to Flynn of the Inland, the Victorian-born Presbyterian minister who founded the Inland Mission in 1921, the Flying Doctor Service in 1929, and who conceived the pedal wireless transceiver. For 39 years, Flynn dedicated himself to those living in an area of more than 500,000 square miles. And in Bathurst, New South Wales, another famous Australian, Joseph Benedict Chifley, was also laid to rest. Son of a blacksmith who rose from an engine driver to become Prime Minister, Ben, or Chiff as he was affectionately known, presented a popular picture as a pipe-smoking, homespun philosopher. From his plain statements and homely sincerity of approach emerged a great strength and integrity. In Melbourne, at the Shrine of Remembrance, veterans and colleagues of 2 world wars paid their respects to one of Australia's greatest soldiers, Sir Thomas Albert Blamey, a lieutenant on Gallipoli, Chief of Staff to General Monash in France in 1918, GOC of the 2nd AIF in the Middle East, commanding officer of Allied land forces in the Southwest Pacific area, the only Australian to attain the rank of Field Marshal. At the Sydney Cricket Ground, Australia and the West Indies met in the 2nd test for what fans dubbed the World Championship. Thrills soon woke this pair up when Lindsay Hassett sent the visitors in. Our bumping pace attack was shared by Ray Lindwall and the unpredictable all-rounder Keith Miller. Worrell scored a brilliant 64 and the visitors totaled 362. Australia was spun into trouble by the 2 20-year-olds, Alf Valentine and Sonny Ramadan, until Miller and Hassett turned the tide with a record 4th wicket partnership of 235. Nugget Miller, as he was known, a magnetic personality. He played in 55 tests and proved to be one of the greatest crowd pleasers cricket lovers had ever seen. This is Jack Iverson, who earlier that year closed a brief but spectacular career. No bowler ever spun him more viciously than this popular Victorian. In his only 5 test appearances against England in the 1950-51 series, he took 21 wickets at a cost of 15 runs apiece to head the Australian averages. Sydney University's Professor Frank Cotton, world famous for his research into the physiology of exercise, was a familiar figure at all types of sporting events, with his stethoscope and stopwatch, and an array of personally designed ergometrical machines measuring the work output of athletes. He laid the foundation of the modern scientific approach to sport in Australia. Manly-trained Big Jim Ferrier, back from America for exhibitions, showed his driving power at the clinic at Concord, assisted by up-and-coming young professional Peter Thompson and Australian amateur champion Peter Hurd. Hurd thrilled the fans with his chipping. Thompson, on his way to join Walter Hagen and Bobby Locke as the only 4 times winners of the British Open, called in at his hometown Melbourne in time to shoot a 283 at the Metropolitan Course and collect from Sir Dallas Brooks the Australian Open Cup. Water babies and surfers throughout the country in 1951 took a tip from the frogmen of World War II and donned flippers to give an extra kick to their aquatic acrobatics. An exhilarating acceleration was achieved to catch those curling combers, provided, of course, you were prepared to go down the mine on the big ones. Brisbane was crowded by racegoers in July 1951 for the Doomben Carnival, the 10,000 sprint. Watch for this sensational fall. Down goes the favourite, Warra King, and jockey Maynard gets a worm's eye view of flying hooves, all of which missed him. A furlong to go, and Noel McGrowdy urges Coniston up on the outside past Deep Sea, on to victory, as Davy Jones stages a mighty burst to pip Field Boy out of third place. A win for Noel McGrowdy, who was later to die in a car accident in Malaya. A few months later, as usual, it was Top Hat Day at Flemington when 28 thoroughbreds faced the barrier for the Melbourne Cup. On the course proper, Sky Streamer on the rails, Bowl John and Midway with the White Blaze are the leaders. Now it's the final stretch. Grey Boots goes to the front, but the New Zealander Akbar looks the winner until Neville Selwood urges Delta to a brilliant victory from Akbar and Double Blank. A great horse and a great jockey, Neville Selwood, who, like McGrowdy, was also to meet a tragic death. 65,000 rugby league fans were at fever pitch when Australia met France in the third and deciding test at Sydney Cricket Ground. Puy Albert broke a 40-year-old test series kicking record with this penalty, and then landed 5 more. Clive Churchill led Australia's fight back, but the fiery Frenchmen, rated outsiders at the start of this, their first Australian tour, turned on an electrifying display, with a pause to replace a pair of pants. Switches of play, long passes. Orthodox moves went by the board. Australia was dazzled by the difference. The seal was set on a shock 35-14 victory when, in the final minute, a hefty right winger barged over the corner, leaving Australia flattened. The crowd was stunned. The impossible had happened. We had lost the Ashes. In another area, 2 bantamweights strove for 15 rounds to flatten one another. Jimmy Carruthers, Olympian of 1948 in London, with only 9 professional fights under his belt, was after Ellie Bennett's Australian title. Carruthers surprised with the speed of his southpaw flicking right and the power of his left hook. Building up an early points lead, he showed 12,000 fight fans that he was in world class. This was his first 15-rounder, and in the final stages he was hard-pressed to hold off Bennett's desperate attack. 18 months later in Johannesburg, Carruthers knocked out Vic Tauil in the first round to become Australia's first world boxing champion, a title he successfully defended 3 times. The referee, Fred Hennebury, had no doubts about this winner. A record crowd jammed the White City courts in Sydney to watch America try to regain the Davis Cup, lost in New York the previous year. Gorgeous Gussie Moran and Dick Sabat were there to cheer on the visitors. Ken McGregor partnered Sedgman near camera against Ted Schroeder and Tony Trabert in the all-important doubles. And Australia was home. Frank Sedgman, hero of his 3rd challenge round, and doubles partner Ken McGregor from Adelaide. For another year, we had the cup. And thanks to Sir Norman Brooks, the stand as well. A bright note on which to end a year tinged with tragedy, studded with strikes, shadowed by war clouds. 1951. A year to remember.